You know what I'm saying? And I have another one I use for a chicken coop, so it's part of my farm, so, I mean, I don't
Well,
know.
is that, again,
Farms are exempt.
if it's used in farming, if it's used for farming.
The farms are exempt. but
Okay,
it's not
that's what I'm
used on
asking.
farms.
To be seen.
If you're using it in a
It's not
farm,
equipment.
the update one that's.
It's the update.
I'm sorry.
but it's what I'm saying is it's part of a vehicle, so I didn't think that was considered as a
And the
farm.
update
You know what I'm saying?
Which, this is what they.
It didn't start out farm, it just ended farm.
Yeah, but if it's being used in farming operations,
Right
we ran into that problem in another township.
Okay, that's what I'm asking, I'm just,
You have to prove that it's being used in farming operations, if that's the case. But
put a
my-
chicken in it, right?
That's what I was gonna say, put a chicken on your ATV.
All taken care of, I got plenty of that. Every new car,
I
Jason,
guess
stick
the
a
question
chicken
for the
in
board
it.
here is,
You're making
are there
big
aspects of
faces.
this that you do not like that you want to change? Have you, some of the samples that were provided, do you want to incorporate aspects of those? Do you want to eliminate this entirely? I guess that's the question presented.
Hey, Michael, I have a question.
Yep.
Or, what's this say? And apparently I don't have a current version here. Again, it's hard to follow along if we're not all on the same page or don't have current updated ordinances or whatever. Junkyards, junk dealers, it says, whatever names they use here, but aren't they licensed by the state or not? Do we know? I don't know, that's why I'm asking. I would imagine that they would have to be licensed by the state. Does anybody know that?
You know, they have to meet certain DEP and EPA rules, like when you drain out, you know, the transmissions were in, you know, some way to contain any kind of oil like that.
I don't know that they're licensed, no, I think they're at least required to be registered.
Yeah.
They're taking vehicles and titles, so it'd be like a car dealership, you know, you can't just do 1,000 of them and not have some kind of registration or license.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I have to have a license by the state for dealership,
Whether it's a
salesperson.
registration or license, yeah, or something like that, for those matters.
And I bring that up because there's several references in what I have, and I'm looking at chapter 54. And the reason why I looked at chapter 54, because in the proposed zoning ordinance, it says refer to that. So am I not correct in,
No, that's, yeah, we're looking at that.
okay. I thought I had outdated information.
But what's your question about the license then?
Because
Other than, you're
It's,
asking if it needs to have a state license, but beyond that, specific to township license?
well, I noticed there's a couple places in here, let me find one. Like 54-11A, the last sentence, the power of the licensing officer to suspend any license. Well, they certainly wouldn't have the authority or the power to suspend a state license. I would think that they would trump the township. And I know I saw that in there more than one place.
Issued here
Yeah.
There- I mean, there's several.
License officer may, to suspend a license issued hereunder.
Yeah, but then the last sentence says the power of the license officer to suspend any license.
Any license, they have the power to suspend. You can't suspend something you don't have the power to suspend. The only thing you can suspend is your junkyard license,
Was that even a license or is that a permit?
the license on the front door.
It's a license?
Are there other licenses for other things in the township? Without use of or another
Well,
one?
it's, no, I'm saying,
No,
it's critical.
Like actual license, not
there's a big difference.
Well, just because, I was just gonna say, is the licensing officer, then he does that for all licenses, or is that, so all permits and all licenses are the same thing?
Yeah, I would read license to be interchangeable with permit,
I don't. Two separate things.
unless I'm wrong.
No, we
That's how I
have,
would read
we
that.
have what, we have the mobile home, or the campground permits, the
Right.
license.
Okay.
I
I didn't know that was interchangeable.
don't know, other permits we might have.
So then the license officer, is that like, so like when I do our campground one, we submit that to Tammy, it goes to the supervisor, so that makes Tammy and you guys the licensing officers
It
then?
could be, or it could be me, the ordinance officer. Could be some of that, I don't know. Could be the policeman. Could be anybody from the township is authorized.
What about planning commission?
Okay, drop.
And
So your contention is that a permit and a license are the same thing?
As the way it's worded here, I would take it, that's,
I would guess so, because it says you have, if you have 2 junkyards or salvage yards, you need a separate license for each. So I would think if you had 1 license in the township, you'd only need 1. So I do think in this case, probably interchangeable permit.
Donington's had a junkyard license for a long time. As far as back as I can recall, Kathy, you remember? I know back in the nineties, maybe even the eighties. They've always, and I don't ever remember being more than 2 junkyard licenses issued. You Rick? McAdoo's and Sprouts, they're the ones they've ever had.
well, I think the bigger thing in this township would be the junk vehicles, is a bigger thing than junk cars, per se.
and again, I guess the question comes down to, this has been in place since, what we say, 96? And the nuisance was in place since,
So four.
oh, before?
2012.
Oh, 2012, okay. So that's 5 years, this has been a lot longer. Are there issues with junk vehicles? Not
Oh,
necessarily
it's
junk
always
cars.
we've always had issues with junk vehicles, that's always, but the junkyard, there's never been issues with junkyard.
Yeah, so junkyards, so it sounds like we're okay with junkyards as far as what's in the books. Unless there's other questions out here, but from the board, it sounds like we're okay with the junkyard provisions. But as far as junk vehicles,
That's more of a nuisance, that's why the nuisance ordinance.
see, I would say that's not in front of this, that's not really zoning related.
Well, I
would be
was
my
gonna say,
argument.
then what's in here, junk vehicle should just be struck out of this section because it's under nuisance then.
And it should just be underneath, it's in the code, yeah, the codification probably should have just eliminated that.
I don't know if it's been codified since the new nuisance ordinance was.
Okay.
Don't you still have to have part of that to issue a permit or a license for a junkyard?
Yeah.
You still have to keep that part.
You can keep that part of it, yeah. For a junk vehicle, there's also a permit
Yeah.
or a license if you want to have junk vehicles.
Yeah.
That can be visible if you don't wanna move them into
Yeah.
storage or fix them. It looks like under this, you could also get a license.
License.
Gold fence. Gold fence.
Correct, but I don't, is there anything on there that talks about, but in here that talks about you can get a license for a junk vehicle?
I don't find that in the nuisance.
Yeah, that's not, so, but yeah, for all, and that's really the only thing that comes up that would apply there. Most of this is junkyard, so I think no real changes to the junkyard.
I don't know if I'll ask this question.
Go ahead,
I don't know if I want to, but
you got to now.
what defines a junkyard or that somebody just has junk vehicles that are unpermitted? I guess my question, how does the township, and I'm not saying you don't need it or do need it, I'm not arguing either way, just how does the township say, well, that's a junkyard, he has to have a license, or,
It's defined in your ordinance.
Would you like to hear what it is?
No, no, that's all right. There's a definition, I'm good with that. Yeah. So there's so many vehicles, or is that part of it?
You have
X
to be in the
amount?
process of selling,
Parts or,
yeah, something, yeah,
Okay,
you have to
great.
sell. You can't just junk it up with, and then say I'm a
I
junkyard,
understand,
yes.
fantastic.
That's for a business or.
Yeah, you got to
And
sell
if you
something.
tried to do that, you couldn't, you would just have to get a license for the junk
Right.
vehicles,
And it
each
says
one.
whether or not the proceeds from such acts or acts are to be used for charity. Oh, so that means you can't say, my junkyard's for charity. Hey, that's a great idea.
Okay, so we're going to, I guess the question is do you want do you want to leave this alone? Are you okay with just referring to it, how it is in the zoning
No, I
ordinance
think it
now? Or
should
do you
be-
want to incorporate
I think it should be- I think every
just the
individual-
junkyard part of it, correct? We're not gonna touch on junk vehicles, because that's not a
Well,
nuisance, right?
that's what everybody wants to do.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Public?
I'll go last.
Does anyone?
Well, you're up.
I think we're.
You're last.
So what you're saying is leave chapter 54 in place?
Correct. The only change would be under 54-3B, it shall be unlawful for any person to possess a junk vehicle. We're not gonna start at 2, because under the nuisance aspect of it, 1 is too many. So we just wanna keep that consistent. So if you have a junk vehicle and you don't wanna move it so that it's not viewable, you have to get a license, or a
Then
permit
you have to have a
with the
license.
township to have that.
I have a problem with that.
54-4 enforcement.
Yes.
Licensing officer, do we, and I guess that can be anybody from what Doug said, it could be a supervisor, police officer, zoning officer, is that correct, Doug?
We typically don't go out in first ordinances, I'm not.
No, I know that, I'm just saying, because somebody asked who.
Authorized by the board.
Under the definitions, it says the township police officer and/or township enforcement officer, so whoever they're designated as such.
Okay,
Whoever's authorized.
so it says, you know, licensed officer of township is hereby given the duty to enforce or to aid in enforcement of all provisions of this chapter, and for the purpose he or she, his, her duty authorized designatee shall have the right and is hereby empowered to enter on any premises on which any business subject to the provisions of this chapter is located or about to be located, and to inspect the same at any reasonable time. Determined by who? I guess the licensing officer. And there's that where it says licensed officer for empowered to issue orders granting, renewal, or revoking any license that is provided for in accordance with the provisions of this chapter. 54-5D, such other information as the licensing officer shall find reasonably necessary to effectuate the purposes of this chapter and to arrive at fair determination of compliance with the terms of this chapter. Well, the 54-7 license fee, why I ask about if they're licensed by the state and they already have a license and already pay a fee, is it proper to have a township license and fee on top of
If
that?
it's reasonable, related to what's involved with this, if it's simply just filing that paperwork and having it on file, then no, it's not fair to charge $500. You know, a $25 fee or something, just so the township has that fee, the permit application on file, it updates it, it looks like under 54.8 that it has to be updated yearly, so I don't think something minimal that can reflect that, you're allowed to charge fees based on those, based on costs associated with it. So, you know, for something that it requires an engineer to go out and inspect, you know, so a roadway or a road cutting fee, something like that, that's gonna be way higher than if all this entails is they file their paperwork each year. I don't think you could get away with charging $300 for that.
Right, because
So
the
it needs to
township's
reflect
not
that.
supposed to make money,
Correct.
just cover costs.
So again, and that's typically covered when they update their fee schedule.
Well, on that 54.8 that you just addressed, it goes back to something somebody else brought up, I think Kathy brought up about
December 31.
consistency, that it's not consistent with the other ones.
So it'll run, so whether they get it January 1 or July 1, it's good through December 31st.
Okay, 5410D, no water shall be allowed to stand in any place on the premises in such a manner as to afford a breeding place for mosquitoes. That probably needs amended or clarified, because you'd have to deal with God when it comes to that. I mean, you know,
Is that covered under nuisance anywhere?
I was just looking at that, I'm not sure. I don't think it is.
But that is a general practice.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
F,
He's not done.
D
Okay,
is a
sorry.
general practice. JD.
what's that?
D is a general practice when it comes to any water that's left standing to promote the breeding of mosquitoes.
The interest of public safety.
I'm gonna leave my water bottle out there.
And that's,
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, any use, if it's, has standing water and there's an issue with mosquitoes, the township has that right.
That's a broad spectrum in this township. There's a lot of low-lying, that when we get a lot of rain and that there's standing water that, you know what I mean,
and we don't have sprayers.
that we don't have control over, you know what I mean?
Thought?
Township,
I think they're more or less referring
It's all old tires.
to tires that are collecting
Hubcaps
water,
left upside down.
discarded buckets, discarded, anything that collects water, not land,
Never been
is the
an
way
issue.
I take that.
We're not talking about.
And it says, no water shall be allowed to stand in any place on the premises in such a manner as to afford the breeding place for mosquitoes. Again, intent doesn't matter. If it's gray, it's a problem.
Since 1996, how many times has that been?
Black and white. We're not in 96,
You
and
never
this
have, you never have, JD.
doesn't mean it
Common sense.
won't.
You have to use common sense. No matter what the law is, you have to apply
Yeah.
with common sense. That's not common sense.
That doesn't always happen.
Well, not that it makes you feel any better, JD, but contract law says, and Michael can clarify this, but that if there's any ambiguity, it's construed against the drafter. So if there's ambiguity, it's construed against the township and for the property owner.
F, no junk should be allowed to rest upon or protrude over or on any public street, walkway, or curb, or become scattered or blown off the premises, business premises, nor shall it be stored or worked on within 20 feet of any state or township road right-of-way. I know that, why that was put in there.
Safety.
No, a particular site, a repair garage in the township that was targeted by this. It's been a problem for years.
That's not true.
Huh?
That's absolutely not true. I was here when that ordinance came to be. We went out and to PSATs, Kathy and I, said, send us down some ordinances. You remember, Kathy? And we went through and did a bunch of them at that time. We didn't write ordinances. We scratched out Buffalo Township and put it in Donegal Township. That's how we did them. Saved a lot of money, just a lot of attorney fees.
Well, that would, if you just take the two junkyards that are in the township, it probably wouldn't apply to Strauss, but it would McAdoo's. And depend on the definition of junkyards, Eddie Shingle's place, I know that's what I was speaking of when I said there was problems in the past that's been brought up and discussed numerous township meetings in the past, years ago.
So I guess what's the I see it as a safety matter. It makes sense why it's in. I don't, again, not knowing the history. What's your concern with that provision?
Well, okay, I'll use Eddie's place for an example. You know,
We're targeting people, that's what he's trying to say.
no, that's not what I said, Dave.
You were
That's not what I,
supervisor
don't put words in my mouth.
I was,
You were supervisor in
that's what I got.
Wow.
That was a,
Since then,
years past, Doug, do you recall that years past in township that was Eddie's, there was complaints and there was issues?
Complaints
Right,
about that down there.
that's what I'm talking about.
Primarily because it being a dangerous intersection, and I can't tell you, but Eric probably can confirm, there've been a number of wrecks at that intersection.
Mhm.
People can't see or pull out, and it's a safety concern. Has been, still is, and it probably will be tomorrow. Was that why that ordinance was written? And that provision, absolutely not.
Junk shall be stored in piles not exceeding 6 feet high. I don't know, a junkyard, I've never seen one that didn't store stuff above 6 feet high. If you stack 2 cars high, you're over 6 feet.
Can I ask, is that particular thing talking about junkyard?
Yes.
Yeah, it's for them. So are we 8 feet? Does that, yeah, again, is that?
At that point, what's the matter? I just, you're asked if there's any problems or issues with
Yeah, I
this.
understand. I'm
You know what I
just
mean? I
asking-
can see a lot of problems with it.
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't have a problem with F. I think it makes
I
sense.
think the other ones that you gave us, the sample ordinances, I think they were both 8.
8,
I
okay.
believe
Is
they
everyone
were.
okay with 8?
Sure.
But if you drive, you know, go to Washington, look at Brookman's or Richmond's or what, you know, they got cars piled 20 feet high. You know, I mean, it's space. If you don't stack them up, you expand and you have a larger footprint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Back to the same thing, licenses shall permit inspection of the business premises by a licensed officer or his or her duly appointed designee at any reasonable time. There's that term again, at any reasonable time. And I'm sure that's at the discretion of the,
Like, have not the courts said numerous times what reasonable times are?
Yeah, typically.
Yes.
I mean, do you want during regular business hours? I'm just asking, would that make?
I would say that'd be more reasonable. I mean, if they're not open, they shouldn't be allowed on the premises, right? If it's not, if it's a business, doesn't that sound reasonable?
Or by appointment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the property owner, the business owner should have a say in that, not just,
Okay, we'll do during regular business hours or as agreed to with the operator. Does that work? Does that make sense?
sounds a lot
Because
more.
if he'd rather meet after hours when he's not working or not doing that.
Appointment, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Jay, because you had brought up about how it relates to the nuisance ordinance, and that addresses that there. No junkyard or salvage yard shall be allowed to become a public nuisance. Nor shall any junkyard or salvage yard operate in such a manner as to become injurious to the health, safety, or welfare of the community. That's, goes without saying.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's one of those where there might be something in here there might be something that occurs on the property that's not specifically listed as you cannot do, but it is an issue for the safety, so that's a catch-all provision that would still allow a township to take action. And that's, again, even if that wasn't in there, the township would have that authority to do so.
So it'd be as it applies to the nuisance ordinance then, is that what you're saying, basically?
As it applies to the general police powers of the township.
Um,
So I'm saying, even if that wasn't in there, the township could still take action if they believed there was a threat to the health, safety, or welfare of the community. They'd have to prove that if they tried to take action in court, but that would apply for any type of use. And the burden would be on the township at that point, though, to prove that, why they believed it rose to that level.
5411, the last sentence I brought up earlier, license officer to suspend any license, says that again. 5411D, the, if you read that, what's that?
Nothing.
Just as being a smart ass.
Mm.
That was a township supervisor too.
Stop it.
That's a good point.
What number?
That's over 60 decibels. 5411D.
Oh, D.
This, I can read it loud so everybody can hear it, you can read it, but man, does that seem awful extreme to me. Any person who violates or permits a violation of this chapter shall, upon conviction in a summary proceeding brought before a district justice under the Pennsylvania Rules of Criminal Procedure, be guilty of a summary offense and shall be punishable by a fine of not more than $1,000 plus costs of prosecution. In default of payment thereof, the defendant may be sentenced to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 90 days. Each day or portion thereof that such violation continues or is permitted to continue shall constitute a separate offense, and each section of this chapter that is violated shall also constitute a separate offense. And again, I'm going to be devil's advocate. Not saying that it would ever happen, Doug, not implying that you would ever do it, or anybody else. Just saying, if it is not crystal clear, and it is a gray area, it is open for interpretation and can be applied as one so chooses.
What's
So,
great about that?
well, no, I'm saying it's pretty extreme, so if somebody has,
But the district judge will never award that. Unless you go in there as a bad guy.
I mean, JD, yeah, to be honest with you, I understand what he says, that's pretty standard across the board. I
Yeah,
mean, if you look at pretty much all, it
if
just says
you
up
look,
to that,
if you
that's
look
the
at the
maximum
Bernie,
amount.
the other stuff, it's the same thing, it's $1,000.
Yeah.
And again, I understand your concern, but if you look at a lot of offenses, just criminal offenses, imprisonment up to 5 years, you know, and you don't see that actually happening. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but most magistrates I see are very hesitant to give any type of fine. Mostly
Right.
what they want is just compliance. You come into compliance, you're good to go.
If you're back the fifth or sixth time, you're probably gonna
If,
get the
yeah, if you get it to that
$1,000
point
fine.
and you're still in front of them, then you might get hammered, but
Michael,
I-
does that mean, though, when it says any person who violates or permits a violation, so that means if whoever the licensing officer is did not enforce this, they're the one?
no, I think it's talking the operator or the
Property
property
owner.
owner, if you're not.
Oh, I thought it meant if you're like just ignoring
You're just
the-
ignoring it.
Yeah.
That, you'd have to file mandamus to just enforce. If you don't believe they're enforcing it, you'd file a mandamus. No, that's, I see what you're saying, but no, I think it's getting at the property owner not being able to say, oh, it's not me who's doing it.
It's
the
just funny
operator."
how it's not any person who violates or permits a violation of this chapter.
Yeah, but to answer you, that's standard across, I think if you look throughout, I'm not saying it couldn't be lowered, but most townships I see, they put the max in there, and I've never seen a magistrate get remotely close to that.
my concern was just that they'd have due process to have the opportunity to correct it or something if, you know, a Strauss or McAdoo's or anybody else for that matter, if, you know, employees or, you know what I mean?
I
There's,
understand,
it's pretty broad, that's all. That's it.
And so we wanna make those, few of those changes, but we wanna incorporate this entire section into the zoning ordinance as far as junkyards go. And when it gets to the next codification, we'll make note that this will be limited to that extent. But that way, anyone going through, that's gonna be a use, they'll find all
You
of
can
these
see it right there.
provisions right there. So in that sense, you typically don't have there's, I think at the end, there's a. That's
Is there
just.
a general penalty, or is there?
Yeah, typically when you do it this way, you won't have a standalone penalty for each one. So what we'll probably need to add, and I'm just gonna have to look, and that's just a formatting issue, under enforcement, yeah, there's enforcement remedies in here, we'll just make sure that. So now, moving forward, the enforcement remedies that are in This one, start on page 54, I believe.
What are you looking at? This one,
This
what?
is the zoning 3617.
I don't have that. Is it the same in the 2.1 version?
Right here, JD. You can get mine.
Not sure. I don't have it.
What page are you on?
I think it is the same.
54, did you say, Mike?
Enforcement.
No, my 54 says definitions pertain to oil and gas.
Here.
Okay. Well,
Okay, 53, enforcement remedies?
more of an issue, the last section we were dealing with, as far as penalties, will not show up verbatim in the zoning under junkyards. That's all I'm saying. There's not gonna be a standalone enforcement provision for junkyards. There's gonna be a catch-all provision for anyone who violates any of these uses.
And it's cheaper too.
Exactly.
It's cheaper, it's $500.
So right now on that, we don't have any like jail time or imprisonment.
It's a civil, they list it as civil. It's a civil penalty.
Jerry.
I don't know, what do you mean?
It is.
He's the lawyer.
It is.
Okay. What's the next one?
He's kind of lost, continue.
We only got 2 more.
Maybe that we didn't do the adult use ones and we'll,
Well, and we didn't get to see the adult use ones either.
yeah, we didn't, it wasn't even on launch. So we don't know.
I don't know. Well, do we want to do mobile home park? I will just start off saying that the North Strabane one that I sent is one that they are just going through right now as far as the mobile home park application. So I would look at the North Strabane one. I talked to the engineer that is overseeing the application there, and he indicated that he thought it was good, it is fair, they are not having any issues with the part that's being, the application that's going through there. So as far as